They say the woods never forget. Every scream, every secret, every life lost between the trees lingers like smoke around a dying campfire. And if you listen closely enough, you might still hear them, those voices that should have been silenced long ago. Tonight, I'm going to tell you 4 stories. 4 tales, whispered around campfires for generations. Some say they're just legends. Others swear they're true. But one thing's certain, by the end of these stories, you'll never look at camping the same way again. So lean in close, keep the fire burning, and whatever you do, don't look into the dark behind you. It starts, like all campfire tales do, with a group of friends out for a weekend escape. They were college kids, restless and eager for adventure, the kind who thought the wilderness was nothing more than a backdrop for laughter, cheap beer, and ghost stories. The leader of the group was a guy named Chris, charismatic, cocky, always the one to push everyone else into things they weren't sure about. The others followed him into the woods without much thought, lugging tents and coolers up a narrow trail that wound through miles of untouched forest. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of pine and earth. Even the birds seemed to stop singing, as if warning them that this was a place humans weren't meant to linger. They found their campsite just before sundown, a small clearing marked by a blackened circle of stones where someone else had once built a fire. To them, it felt like a perfect spot. To the forest, it felt like a scar. That night, they built their own fire, the flames licking at the dark as shadows swayed around them. They laughed, they told jokes, they passed bottles hand to hand. And, of course, someone brought up ghost stories. Chris smirked, tossing a pine branch into the flames. "You know," he said, "these woods have their own legend. About a camper who wandered out here years ago and never came back. They say he still roams, looking for a way home, but he can't find it. And if you're not careful, he might mistake you for one of his friends and drag you off into the dark." The group laughed nervously, brushing it off. But one girl, Rachel, didn't laugh. She frowned into the fire, her face pale in the flickering glow. "Where'd you hear that?" she asked. Chris just shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It's just a story." But later that night, when the fire burned low and the others dozed off, Rachel woke to a sound. It was faint, distant, like a voice carried on the wind. She sat up in her sleeping bag, straining to hear. "Hello." The word was soft, broken, like someone calling out after running too far. She froze. The others were still asleep. The voice came again, closer this time. "Where are you?" Rachel's skin prickled with cold. She whispered Chris's name, but he didn't stir. No one did. Slowly, she turned toward the tree line. The firelight barely reached that far, but in the shifting dark, she swore she saw movement. A figure standing just beyond the glow. Tall, still, watching. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to wake the others, but when she blinked, the figure was gone. Only trees remained. The next morning, Rachel told the group what she'd seen, but Chris just laughed. "You were dreaming," he said. "Too much beer. Don't freak everyone out." But she knew she hadn't been dreaming. That night, it happened again. This time, Chris heard it too. The voice calling from the woods, weak, desperate. It sounded close. Too close. Against Rachel's protests, Chris grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the trees. "Hello," he called, his beam slicing through the dark. "Who's out there?" The voice came again. "Help me." Without hesitation, Chris moved deeper into the forest, the light bobbing until it vanished behind the trunks. The others shouted after him, but the woods swallowed their voices whole. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Chris never came back. At dawn, they searched. No tracks. No sign of him. Just his flashlight lying dead in the dirt, its bulb shattered. Some say Chris was pulled away by something not meant to be seen. Others whisper that he joined the lost camper, doomed to wander the woods forever, calling out for help that will never come. And if you camp in those forests today, some claim you can still hear them two voices now, echoing through the trees, asking the same question over and over again. Where are you? There's a stretch of wilderness up north that locals refuse to camp in, not because it's dangerous terrain, not because of bears or wolves, but because of the silence. The kind of silence that presses down on you like a weight, swallowing every sound you make until even your own heartbeat feels too loud. The story goes like this. A family of 4 once drove out there on a warm summer evening. They were seasoned campers' tent, lanterns, everything packed neatly into the trunk of their station wagon. The father wanted his kids to experience real camping, away from the noisy tourist spots and busy parks. He'd found a secluded site marked on an old map deep in the woods where few people went. When they arrived, the place looked perfect. A clearing, soft ground for tents, and a stream nearby. But something was off. The kids noticed it first. "Dad," the younger one said, tugging on his sleeve, "where are the birds?" The father laughed it off. "They're around, probably quiet this time of day." But as they unpacked, the mother began to notice it too. No birds. No crickets. Not even the rustle of leaves in the wind. The forest stood utterly still, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. That night, they lit a fire and tried to ignore the unease gnawing at them. The flames cracked, the wood popped, but beyond that, the world remained silent. No owls calling, no insects buzzing, just emptiness. The children huddled close to the fire. "I don't like it here," the older one whispered. The father forced a smile. "It's fine. We're just not used to peace and quiet." But peace doesn't make your skin crawl. Peace doesn't make you feel like something is pressing its face against the back of your neck, watching, waiting. When it was time for bed, the family retreated into their tent, the fire still burning low outside. They lay in their sleeping bags, listening to nothing. Not a sound, not even the wind. The silence grew heavier by the minute, so thick it seemed to hum in their ears. And then something new appeared in that silence. A sound. It wasn't much, just a faint crunch, like a footstep on dry leaves. The father opened his eyes, straining to listen. Another crunch. Closer. Slow, deliberate. He held his breath. The sound circled the tent, one step at a time. The mother clutched his arm, eyes wide in the dim glow of the lantern. The children whimpered softly, too afraid to move. Then the footsteps stopped. The father, desperate to prove it was nothing, grabbed the lantern and unzipped the tent. He stepped outside. No one was there. The trees stood tall and silent, their shadows long and unmoving. The fire had burned almost to embers, but the air was still. Too still. He turned in a slow circle, every instinct in him screaming to go back inside. And then he noticed something in the dirt. Footprints. Not boots, not bare feet, but long, thin impressions in the soil, like something tall had been pacing around their tent. The prints were deeper than his own, pressed hard into the ground, as if whatever made them had been leaning in close, watching. The father doused the fire and hustled everyone into the car. They drove through the night, headlights cutting through endless trees, until finally the silence broke, first with the chirp of crickets, then with the distant hoot of an owl. Only then did they breathe again. They never spoke about it after. But years later, campers who stumbled onto that same clearing told the same story. The air is too still, the forest too quiet, and in the dirt around their tents, they find the same strange, elongated footprints. Some say it's a spirit bound to those woods, feeding on silence itself. Others believe it's something older, something that waits in the hush between heartbeats, moving closer with every breath you take. So, if you ever camp somewhere and realize you can't hear a thing, no birds, no bugs, not even the wind, don't wait around. Pack your things and go. Because once the silence starts watching you, it doesn't stop. There's a legend about a campground that shut down back in the late 1970s. No one talks about it much anymore, but if you dig deep enough, the old locals will tell you why it was abandoned. Not because of budget cuts, not because of storms or flooding. It was shut down because of a man, not a ranger, not a camper, not anyone who was supposed to be there. Just a man who didn't belong. The first story goes back to a group of college kids on a weekend trip. They drove out to the site late at night, laughing, drinking, setting up their tents by flashlight. Everything was normal until one of them noticed a figure standing at the tree line. At first, they thought it was a ranger coming to check on them. But the figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't say anything. Just stood there, half hidden in the trees, watching. When they shone a flashlight on him, he stepped back out of sight. The group shrugged it off, telling themselves it was probably another camper. But as the night dragged on, they kept catching glimpses of him, always at the edge of the firelight, just far enough away that they couldn't see his face. And here's the strange part. Every time they looked away, every time they tried to ignore him, he seemed to get closer. By midnight, the figure had circled their camp 3 times. They could hear the crunch of leaves, the snap of twigs, the sound of breathing just beyond the dark. Finally, one of the guys worked up the nerve to call out, "Hey, buddy, you lost." Silence. The fire popped, embers floating into the air, but the woods gave no answer. And then a low laugh. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't nervous. It was hollow, broken, like someone forcing sound out of a throat that had forgotten how to laugh. The figure didn't step forward, didn't explain, just laughed, long and rasping, until it faded back into the night. The students didn't wait around. They grabbed what they could and ran to their car, leaving their tents behind. They sped off down the gravel road, headlights shaking across the trees. But as they rounded the last bend, one of them screamed. The man was standing in the middle of the road, not running, not chasing, just standing there, arms at his sides, his face hidden in the shadow of the trees. They swerved to avoid him, tires skidding on loose gravel. By the time they looked back, he was gone. When they told the rangers the next day, no one believed them, but the rangers searched anyway. And here's where it gets unsettling. They found the tents. They found the ashes of the fire. But they also found footprints. Bare feet, huge, wide, deep, too deep for a normal man. And the prints didn't just circle the tents, they led away into the forest. Miles and miles, farther than any person could walk in one night. Over the next 2 years, more campers reported the same thing. A tall man at the tree line, silent, watching, always closer when you looked away, always gone when you shined a light. Some campers went missing, their tents slashed open, their belongings scattered, their cars still parked in the lot. But the campers themselves, gone without a trace. That's when the park shut down the site. Officially, it was for maintenance, but the locals know better. They say the man still walks those woods, waiting for anyone foolish enough to camp there again. And the strangest part, every witness swears he looks different each time. Sometimes too tall, sometimes too thin, sometimes bent and crooked. But the one detail that never changes, he has no face, no eyes, no mouth, nothing but smooth, pale skin, stretching where features should be. If you're ever camping and notice someone standing at the edge of the firelight, don't look too long. Don't call out. Don't even breathe too loudly, because once he notices you noticing him, you've already stayed too long. And the next time you look up, he might be closer. Much, much closer. Not all abandoned campgrounds are empty. Some are worse. There's a place the rangers won't even step foot in anymore. No signs point to it. No trail markers lead you there. But if you wander deep enough through the brush, you'll find it. The old campground. At first glance, it just looks like ruins, fire pits, overgrown with weeds, picnic tables rotting into splinters, the skeleton of a ranger's cabin collapsing under moss. But if you go further in, past the trees that crowd too close together, you'll see something strange. The tents, not new ones, old, canvas, heavy duty, the kind that hasn't been manufactured in decades. And yet, they look freshly pitched, neat, zippers closed, like the campers who owned them had just stepped away for a moment, but no one ever steps back out. The first hiker who stumbled on them thought it was some kind of preservation project. Maybe the park left them there for history's sake, but when he unzipped one of the tents, his stomach turned. Inside wasn't sleeping bags. Inside wasn't gear. Inside was dirt, packed hard, like a grave. Every tent was the same. Heavy canvas, neat and orderly, zipped tight, and every one of them filled with earth. Word spread, and soon thrill seekers started making the trek to see the grave tents for themselves. Some came back, pale and shaken, refusing to talk about what they'd seen. Others never came back at all. And then came the stories. A group of friends hiked in one summer, armed with flashlights and nerves of steel. They found the tents too easily, in fact, like the woods wanted them to. They laughed, dared each other to unzip one. When they did, sure enough, they found dirt. But then something shifted. The air grew heavy. The woods grew darker, like the sun was setting too fast. And from inside the tents came a sound, not the rustle of fabric, not the scrape of zippers, something deeper. A slow inhale, like the earth itself was breathing. The friends froze. One of them whispered, "Did you hear that?" And then the tent they had unzipped began to rise, bulging outward, as if something beneath the soil was pushing up from inside. They bolted, crashing through the trees, not daring to look back. When they finally reached their car, hearts pounding, they realized one of their friends was missing. The police searched. They found no trace except for one more tent pitched neatly in the clearing, newer than the others, zipped shut. No one opened it. Over the years, hikers and campers swear the number of tents has grown. Some say each missing person adds another to the collection, and some whisper that if you linger too long, if you dare unzip more than one, you'll hear voices coming from the dirt, calling your name, asking you to lie down. They say the tents aren't just graves, they're invitations. So if you're ever lost in the woods and stumble upon a campsite that looks too perfect, too untouched, don't unzip anything. Don't even touch them, because those tents don't belong to the living. And if you're not careful, the next one might belong to you. If you enjoyed these stories, hit the like button. Drop your thoughts or your own creepy encounters in the comments, and subscribe for more unsettling explorations and bone-chilling tales every week. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a scare.